the interview you're about to see is with Brittany, who's a friend of mine who lives in Kansas City that's been dealing with addiction, opioid addiction for 10 years. The video quality on her side of the call is pretty poor for the first 60% of the interview, so just hang in there. You can still hear what she has to say, and her points are still very valid and important to hear. So just hang in with the bad video. Thanks for checking out this video. If you find it to be resonant, if you find it to be of importance, please share it with those you love. Please share it with people that you think would benefit from hearing it. So Brittany, thanks for taking the time to come back and be visible and be vocal with me and share what's going on. For those who don't know, you recorded a segment with me for Spotlight and Focus. When was that? Back in November? When did we do that?
Yeah, it was something like that. It was quite a while ago.
Yeah, it was a while back. I think it was November, because in December, and do set up where you were at when we had that interview, because the next month you were in jail. So let's talk about where you were. And I had you on the show to talk specifically about your situation as somebody who was dealing with addiction, had been dealing with the cycle of addiction for a decade. And in the context of our show being about psychedelics and about part of the psychedelic universe being about helping people who are in addiction recovery or who need something dramatic or drastic, or talking about how access to effective care is tough because it's cost prohibitive or it's only for a certain section of our society. I thought it was important for you as an eloquent and insightful speaker to share a lot of details, and you were very brave and candid in doing that, to share details of where you were coming from, how you came into addiction, how you had navigated the space, how you were surviving or not doing as good of a job as surviving, and what your aspirations were. At the time, I believe you had something like 60 days clean, or maybe you even didn't. I'm not even sure, because the truth, as we've learned, as I've been your friend for the last several years and have learned about your process over the last 3 in particular, the truth can be a complicated thing. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what led up to our initial meeting and then what happened immediately afterwards, if you would, please.
Absolutely. So on our last meeting, I did have 4 months clean. I was doing really well, but unfortunately, that's a cycle of addiction. I stopped going to meetings. I stopped taking care of myself. I tried to get off my Suboxone. For those who don't know what Suboxone is, it's an opiate antagonist. It blocks the opiate receptors on the brain in recovery and allows the shift into a normal life. It stops craving, stops withdrawals, etc. I tried to wean off the Suboxone myself, and I stopped going to treatment. And unfortunately, that led to a very heavy relapse. And my relapses always pick up where they left off. So within a month, I had lost my place to stay. I was kicked out of a sober living home. I started staying with my mother. And I started using heroin again. And it was about that time where what always happened. I lost everything. And I became homeless on the streets again. And when I'm homeless on the streets and I'm in my addiction, I do things that I don't think I would ever do. I start stealing. That's how I make my living, stealing and selling. And it took about a month for me to have my first criminal arrest in my entire life. I was arrested on Christmas Eve for a felony theft and a felony possession. I was put in jail, and I was able to bond out the next day. And I didn't realize the seriousness of the situation. I continued to use, and about a week later, on New Year's Eve, I was arrested again for the same thing, for a felony possession and a felony theft. This time, they were not so easy on me. I was put in jail for about 10 days. I went through an incredible detox. And I was able to bond out on a $5,000 bond. I was put on house arrest. Unfortunately, my addiction was not done with me. I was not able to quit using. I used the same night I got out of jail. I was staying with my mother, and I kept showing up to bond supervision. I was trying showing up to bond supervision, and I kept failing my UAs. And, the courts will only take so much of that. So it was about 3 weeks before my house arrest officer called me and said that they were going to issue a warrant for my arrest. And of course, in my panicked brain, I felt as if I only had one option. I cut my house arrest bracelet off and I ran. I ended up homeless on the streets again. My family wouldn't speak to me. My mother put out a missing persons report on me. And I honestly didn't think I was going to live long enough to be caught. That was where my brain was at the time. I was on the run for about 5 weeks. I was living under a bridge on 40 highway. I was stealing to survive, and I knew that one day I would be caught. But like I said, it didn't seem as serious to me because my life had no value once again. So on Valentine's Day, actually February 13th, I was caught on the run. I was at an Ulta Beauty and I was arrested for felony theft. I also had an altercation with the police, which led to a multiple of other charges. But I call that day my miracle day, February 13th. Today is the 13th, so it is my 5 months clean today. I spent 4 months in the county jail. Thank you very much. I spent 4 months in the county jail. It was my first time in jail long term. I spent 2 months in Jackson County and 2 months in Johnson County. Now I realize it was just part of my story and it was supposed to happen. It's the only thing that was going to get me clean. Addiction only lands you in jails, institutions, and death. And I'm glad that that was my option as opposed to one of the others. Yeah, that's basically a rundown of what's happened since our last interview. It's been a crazy ride, but I'm really grateful to be here.
Yeah, obviously it's a lot that's transpired since the last interview. And what you're looking at now, you had charges in, for those who aren't familiar with the geography of Kansas City is a large metropolitan area that spans areas of eastern Kansas and western Missouri. And you had charges in both states, in both Jackson and Johnson County. And you wound up in jail in Jackson County, but then you were moved over to Johnson County. And then Johnson County wound up, is it correct to say they wound up dismissing charges against you, Brittany?
No, I was sentenced to charges. So I pled guilty to my charges. On August 9th, I'm sentenced to probation for those charges. Unfortunately, I'm still looking at charges in Jackson County that are being taken care of. I have court coming up this month for those. And then I have a couple new cases that have opened up in the last week. So I have a lot to take care of, but I'm ready and open to doing it.
Yeah, so the charges in Johnson County result in probation, but that they're actively seeking jail time for you in Missouri right now, in Jackson County, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And you just learned recently of some new charges against you too that you weren't aware of, or a new case that's being built against you. I think, to clarify again, back in December there were 11 felony counts. Is that correct?
Yes.
Including resisting arrest and striking an officer while you were resisting arrest, and you asked if I would show the mugshot of you, the infamous, the notorious mugshot. That you've got a couple mugshots, but that last one is one of the most frightening things that I've ever seen. Yeah, and it's good to keep that in your scrapbook to see, the range of your possibilities and where you don't want to have to go, but. So that's when I show that it's with your blessing, and you asked me to do it, or else I wouldn't.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, all this, speaking about this, is not meant to be masturbatory. It's not meant to be gratuitous. It's not meant to be pornographic in nature. Speaking about this is meant to illustrate how deep the hole goes, how impossibly difficult it is to extricate yourself from this cycle. You have 5 months clean today, which is amazing. And I know that it has not been easy by any stretch. I mean, we talk every day, and, some days you'll be doing fine. Some days you'll be hit with an incredibly hard reality that you are compelled to use again, that you feel like your life doesn't have a purpose, like you never learned how to have a healthy structure. You never learned how to have a world that didn't consist of looking to alter your mood and your state of mind by using and then doing whatever it took to use.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's your presumption now that you're going to have to go back into jail. Is that right?
Yes, that's my presumption. Like I said, I have a court August 11th for Jackson County, and they will probably take me into custody. I'm happy to do the time though, considering how far I've gotten at this point, nothing scares me anymore. Being on the streets, being actively addicted to mind-altering substances, that's what scares me the most. Slipping scares me the most. What's transpired over the last 5 months has truly been a miracle for me, considering where I've been. It's phenomenal how far I've come. Just to clarify, I'm looking at 2 assaults on an officer, a resisting arrest charge, a paraphernalia charge, a possession charge, and a felony theft charge. Those are the cases that have not been taken care of up to this point. So that's what I'm looking at right now. And it just goes to show how somebody that's so clear-headed and so clear-minded can fall so far back in addiction, things I would never dream of doing now. It's crazy. It really is. I appreciate your kind words.
Well, even though you say you would never dream of doing those things now, you do using now.
I do. Absolutely.
You do still think about using. You are still, even in spite of 11 felony charges, and you know that it takes you to jail, and obviously that it endangers your life. Like, that's just still, we're talking about a powerful hold. We're talking about something is needed to break this absolute death grip that heroin and fentanyl have over those who are addicted, those who are addicted to opioids. What I was trying to help you with back in November was looking at the option of getting you into a ketamine regimen, a ketamine treatment to break the addiction mechanism that has grown and thrived and infected your neurology. Like that my hope was to get you down to Florida to assist to a treatment facility that was going to be, that we had worked with, sort of setting up the option for you to have ketamine treatments at Myself Wellness and Bonita Springs. And obviously you have never done that before. All you know is your routine and your life subsisting on addiction. And I could tell you about it. Intellectually, you could hear it, but your day-to-day life was about like the feelings that are constantly welling up in you, the physiological sensations that are constantly welling up in you. And, you made the decisions that you did, and you continued to use, and you ran when you were under house arrest, cutting off your bracelet. And it obviously derailed that. But initially having you on the show was really to say, look, here is an individual. Maybe we don't see them every day, but they are everywhere. Here's an individual who is in her addiction and has a genuine, sincere desire to stop and to change her life and to take control of her life and to move in a new direction, coupled alongside with the cast iron trap of all of your life that's preceded that moment and all of your life that still exists in that time. And it is an absolutely nonsensical, insane, impossibly difficult reality for you, for loved ones, for anyone that cares about you. And this is the case for so many other women and men and individuals with addiction. And we have to find something that can be implemented to destroy this hold that the substance has over the individual's spirit and body. And I was really hoping for you that that ketamine could have played a part. And there's no guarantee, but there are people who are advocating that it's one of the best possibilities for people. And I think you obviously understand the need for evasive action and new ideas, because you had said you were weaning off the Suboxone, but I think ultimately, even if that was the case, you might not have been equipped to quit without the help of something even more powerful. I mean, right now, it's your willpower. Would you attribute your willpower to your 5 month sobriety?
I would attribute my incarceration, being removed off the streets and being put in a controlled environment for so long. That was the only thing that would have saved me. I would not have been, willpower alone would never have been enough to accomplish this. My story is not unique. You know, I went from a chaotic childhood straight into a lifetime of addiction. I've never learned how to live. I've never learned how to live clean. Nobody ever taught me. And I hear it all the time. I go to meetings every day and I hear, oh, my cravings are so bad today. I mean, people who have 7 years, 8 years clean, 20 years clean, my cravings are so bad today. My brain is not producing dopamine the way I would like it to. I have this undeniable sadness inside of me that I can attribute to my childhood. This is a constant issue, and there's just not enough treatments available to people like me, you know, and we are a very small percentage. We're a very small percentage of people that are clean, that have clean time. I mean, we're talking single digit percentages of people in addiction that make it to a point where I'm at. There are hundreds of thousands of us out there that the treatments that are available aren't working. You know, there's only so many treatments, especially to people with no income, with no insurance. I've never been able to have more than a couple options open to me in terms of rehab, in terms of treatment, in terms of medication. Ketamine-assisted therapy is something that we need, that people like me need. Many Brittany Bendas out there need it. If it wasn't for my incarceration, I would still be homeless on the streets, and I can guarantee that.
Yeah, but you know, even in your incarceration, drugs still entered the facility.
They did. Absolutely. It's inescapable. There was a day that I was in my cell and somebody slipped methamphetamines under my door. And I'll never forget it. Luckily, I had been in jail for 3+ months, and I had already made up my mind about where I wanted to go with my life and how this time needed to be different. And I was able to resist. But if it had been my first month, or even my second month, or my second month into my third month, I probably would have done it. Absolutely. And there are many women in there that were just like me, that that had 5 months, 6 months in the facility and still plan to go back out and use. So incarceration isn't the answer for everybody. I'm just lucky it was for me. But that's why we need different treatments out there. Everybody's different. Some situations are more severe than others. Some brains are more damaged than others. Drugs really take a toll on the brain and the nervous system and really take over the body, and alter the chemicals in your brain that you depend on to survive, that you depend on to make it day to day and to make rational decisions. And I feel like if there was an option that was like ketamine-assisted therapy or psychedelic-assisted therapy, I would not have had to go through everything I've had to go through. You know, I don't think it would have taken something as severe as incarceration or 11 felony charges or being homeless or a bridge on 440 highway for me to get to this point where I'm at, you know?
Yeah. And you know, I think it's important to note that I have visited with people who are advocating and who have a vision for the implementation of ketamine therapy in the prisons, for the rehabilitation the potential for rehabilitation through ketamine in particular to be something that's offered in the prisons. Now, we're so early in the understanding of how an implementation like this might look and how it could work for different people. And I know there's a lot of concern about addicts in recovery or people who are trying to break their addiction and utilizing another substance like ketamine. There's a stigma about that as well, but that's why these individuals are trying to get the information out there, trying to show anecdotal evidence. And maybe it's not ketamine for everyone. Maybe it's ibogaine, or maybe it's ayahuasca, or maybe it's psilocybin. But the point is, when we are delving into this world that's centered on psychedelics and how psychedelics can be integrated to create a more just, a more equitable, a more healthy society, a consistent consideration in envisioning that society is, how do we help those who are in the throes of addiction, whose neurology is damaged, who cannot find the rational thinking, the self-respect, the empathy for others, who have it in them? You've always been an amazing example to me of someone who I feel like has all the potential in the world to be a thriving, productive individual in civil society. And you started from nothing. You started from zero. You had every strike against you, socioeconomically speaking, emotionally speaking. Who knows what your genealogy was made up of, what traits you were possessed of before you even became a fully sentient young adult, but you started using at 16. Again, to revisit this, you were prescribed opioids for ovarian cysts.
I was.
Yeah, and you were living in a, just revisit the scenario real quick for people who are watching this for the first time.
Let's see. I grew up in poverty. I developed a certain sadness that would follow me into early adulthood. I moved on my own at 16. I worked 2 jobs to take a cab every single day to high school, to finish high school. The only apartment I could afford was out of my school district. So my cab company ended up attending my graduation. But it was about that time I was working, and I started developing severe ovarian cysts. I remember one time I was in the hospital and they thought they were going to have to do a surgery on me in the morning because the cysts were so big they were twisting my ovaries. And at that point I was prescribed hydrocodones for my pain. And they ended up prescribing me, giving me refills on those. And I remember taking them for the first time and realizing, this is the feeling I've been looking for my entire life. This comfort, this satisfaction, this gratification. And eventually the prescription ran out. I was prescribed Vicodin for a little bit. And the prescription ran out. And to this day, it frustrates me that nobody explained to me the consequences of taking controlled substances like that. Because it would mark the beginning of my addiction. It would mark the beginning of 10 years of addiction. Shortly after that, I started buying them from my neighbor. And I went on like that for a while. It was, I was a functional addict. I was able to work. I was able to keep a job. I was able to keep a house. I would move from apartment to apartment. I learned I had to teach myself a lot of things. I had to teach myself how to pay bills. I had to teach myself how to drive a car. I had to teach myself how to build a life as an adult, which ended up with a lot of failures. I'm in a lot of debt right now. I'm not a great driver, etc. But I learned how to, it's an accomplishment to learn to do those things yourself. I ended up, meeting a man and moving in with him. And he was a severe alcoholic. And that's when I started doing cocaine. That was one of the harder drugs I started using. And at that point, that's when I realized I was a binge addict. One is too many and 1,000 is never enough for me. I continued to use cocaine. And it took a toll on my body and ended up giving me a blood clot, which in turn resulted in a heart attack at the age of 21. And to this day, I still have health problems. You know that I have health problems from that heart attack. I have blood pressure issues. I have blood coagulation issues. And about that time is when my opiate addiction really took off as well. I started to realize that I wasn't functioning the same way. My work ethic had changed. My relationships with other people had changed and warped. I was not a likable person anymore. And it was about that point I realized I could not afford my habit anymore. I was broke all the time. I would work 7 days straight, never take a day off. And at the end of that week, I would have $0 to my name because I would spend every penny I had seeking the next high. And pills are expensive, especially on the streets, very expensive. I'm talking $30 a pill, At that point, I switched to heroin. I made the decision to switch to heroin. I still remember the very first time I tried it, and it was a wrap after that. I mean, I spent years and years with this domino effect in my life where I would lose something, and then the next week I would lose something else. And it was this cycle of, well, I'll get it together tomorrow. Next week, I'll get it together. But addiction doesn't discriminate, and it has a certain cycle that is never ending. It's like a revolving door, there's no end to it. I would lose my car. I would get another car. I would lose my house. I lost the man that I was in love with. I started living in my car, and then I would lose my car again, and then I would lose my job, and I would start stealing from jobs. I've been fired from quite a few jobs for stealing. And next thing you know, you're homeless on the streets. You have nowhere to go, and you're thinking, how did I get here? But like I said, my story is not unique. There was one year I went to rehab 5 times, and it was the same rehab because what was available to me without an income and with no insurance was very limited. So obviously, looking back on that, something wasn't working, whether it be the medication I was on or the treatment facilities I was entering. But that just raises the issue of the limited treatment options there are for people like me, where I should have done something different. Somebody should have stepped in and offered me something different, but that just wasn't available to me. So I continued to get on the same Suboxone, the same medication. I continued to attend the same treatment facilities. I continued, I really did try. And I went on for years like that until I reached this legal trouble, where my addiction really came to a head, and I officially reached my rock bottom. And looking back, it would have made so much sense for there to have been a different option available to me. But unfortunately, the world we live in, there's just not. And like you said, ketamine isn't for everybody, but there's a slew of other medications in your field of work that could work for a range of addicts. Something that we really need to make available for people who have 10 years in addiction. I mean, it's incredible the toll it takes on the brain, how many factors play in to the throes of addiction.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about here is when we look at ourselves in the mirror, when we look at ourselves as a country, as a culture, as a civilization, when we look at ourselves in the mirror and we say, what are our values? What do we really care about? Do we care about helping the least of those among us? Do we care about giving and considering how complicated life is for someone who is dealing with poverty alone and then addiction on top of that? What is the motivation societally for this sea change to happen? How fast can substances be researched and put through clinical trials? We keep talking about ketamine because it's the one thing that's available right now. And there are advocates in the space that are working for individuals like yourself in particular who are dealing with addiction and see it as a way out of addiction because of the way it changes your neurochemistry. And that's really what we're talking about. As you tried different methodologies for getting well, as you went to rehabilitation centers, as you tried the Suboxone, nothing was more powerful ultimately than the allure of what you knew, the dependability of the cycle, and your brain, even as you were trying to implement maybe even the 12 steps or a step program or therapies or cognitive therapy or group discussions, whatever it was. It's just that inside it was already set to need something else and to fixate on something else. And it's hard to break that intangible hold with rational thought or like sensible measures. I mean, it just continues to be something that people who haven't dealt with it have such a hard time relating to it, right? Because it's just so bizarrely unique, isn't it? There's nothing like trying to be a person that's working in their own best interest, yet being controlled internally by this whole other predicament.
Absolutely. It is so important that this is a subject that's at the top of people's brain right now. The percentage of people that are addicted to substances such as heroin and methamphetamines and crack cocaine is growing and growing. We're looking at death percentages that are astronomical, especially fentanyl has been introduced to the equation. Different strands of fentanyl are being introduced to the equation, and people are dying at a skyrocketing rate. I know 2 people personally in the last 2 weeks that have passed away from a drug overdose. We have entire communities of people that are dying at alarming rates, people that we love, people's brothers and sisters, and it's so important that we tackle this as a country. It's insane, the percentages of people that are addicted. I believe it's 1 in 5 people are addicted to mind controlling substances right now. Substance abuse disorder, like you said, it is a beast. It is, these people have the desire to do well. They do. But the control it takes on the brain is just undefeatable. I've spent 10 years in the throes of it, and knowing that I have the desire to do well, I have the desire to be a better person, I have the desire to have a normal life, be financially stable, combating these thoughts with the action of doing well and the action of getting clean, and it's impossible, and it's hard to put yourself in that position if you've never been in it. But that's why we need to educate people. That's why we need to bring these facts to the community. We need to raise awareness of addiction and the toll it takes in people's lives. Absolutely. I think it's one of the most important things we could be doing as a country right now is bringing awareness to the population of people that suffer from substance use disorder.
Yeah. And I want to thank you again for being so brave and candid with me. And you always share with me as your friend, what you're thinking from day to day, even if it's nothing you're proud of, and that's so important to be able to constantly share that. And I try to listen to you in a non-judgmental way, always advocating for what I think is the best choice for you, but understanding that you are dealing with your own internal system. And I continue to be so incredibly proud of your ability to express yourself and your ability to see this. And that not everybody is like that. You were in jail with a variety of other women that have come from many different places, and some of them are just completely lost, aren't they? Some of them are just completely They don't have, you have a gift of expressing yourself. You have a gift of eloquence and insight. And so, my hope for you remains strong. Even the fact that you've died and been Narcan back to life. You could be dead now. You've had 2 heart attacks at this point as well. I mean, you're, it's just, and you have a mom and you have a sister and you have a brother, and I just keep going back to this weird, mysterious concept. Why do we care? Who cares? Who cares about people in your situation? I just moved to Los Angeles, and as everybody knows, the homeless situation, the unhoused situation is out of control, and in being back in Kansas City, even, you can see how much that's growing too. We're coming out of this pandemic, we're coming out of this 2 years, or coming out, wherever we are. Economic depression, social inequality, it just continues to crush people. And when people are introduced to something that immediately brings pleasure, at the same time, it changes your brain forever. It's just, I'm fortunate to be in the position where I can talk about the psychedelic universe and empowerment and becoming more empathetic creatures and becoming more enlightened creatures, and using substances that are available to us to enhance the quality of our own lives and the lives of those around us. And knowing you and being privy to your journey has been a blessing for me, because it allows me to help open this space for other people to just take what we're doing by presenting this today. Everybody, is we're just taking a moment to lay it out there and say, let's check in with the reality of somebody who is in addiction. Let's check into somebody who has prostituted themselves on the street, who subjected their body and their soul and their spirituality and their entire existence to the volatility and the brutality of the world. Let's check in and sort of try to get an idea of what's going on here, and let's innovate together. Let's find out, what's it going to take to get something like ketamine therapy in the prison system? Do we care about seeing people being really, truly rehabilitated so that they can, and what that means is, you have to understand, it changes your brain chemistry. We're talking about physiological changes, not just, oh, Brittany doesn't want to stop using, so she's not going to stop using. We're talking about something as real as heart disease, as scoliosis, as depression and anxiety. We're talking about physiological realities here, and it's evasive action that's needed, right? It's needed yesterday, it's needed today, it's needed tomorrow. And so you're right, just you coming on and sharing this, and for whoever can hear this, let's be innovative. Let's continue to figure out how we can build a bridge between people who are fortunate enough, like myself, that has not had to contend with opioid addiction, who manages my own state of mind through my own efforts, and who had advantages socioeconomically. And it's an unequal society that we live in. But I think that when we have these discussions and we create an open space for learning, and we have brave individuals like yourself who can speak clearly about the realities of this, then our understanding grows and our empathy grows, and we can be more innovative and industrious. We can be pioneers. We can be creative and searching for solutions. And Brittany, I know that you're looking at doing more jail time soon, but you've got 5 months clean. You've been living in a home with other women who are trying to stay clean. You are working a job that you're holding down. You don't always want to go. You would rather be doing things that are different, but you've been going, and it's not a career. It's a stopgap right now for you. And you're going to meetings all the time, as often as you can go. But I think it just bears repeating now. Economically speaking, the challenges, like I've had to witness you're dependent on other people. You're dependent on public transit. Every time you get on a city bus, someone tries to either get you to have sex with them or sell you drugs. I mean, the climate is insanely brutal. It's like you're not just put into the world. No, now you're free. You can be. No, you're put into a world that's just constantly festering in this, right? So but you've been going to meetings. You still need to get a sponsor. There are Zoom meetings available. But if you had something that could help with your confidence, with your peace, people who are upwardsly mobile, executives at companies, and people who have resources, people who are looking for self improvement or just want to be better people, but maybe they have $185,000 a year salaries, the jobs they have. They're coming for the same thing. They're coming to find confidence and consistent happiness. And if your brain chemistry was naturally consistently happy, then you might not have as much of a craving to alter it so that you could not be miserable in your life. And that's not an unreasonable ask. People shouldn't have to go through to exceptional measures to not be miserable in their lives. And I mean, I just salute the heck out of you for hanging in there and constantly turning away now in your sobriety, in your program, in your recovery, constantly turning away from what you've leaned on as a crutch for a decade, and not just a crutch, but as your reality for your sense of self, for your sense of purpose, for your sense of wellness, even though it's irrational. I as you look at going back into jail, I would hope that you can maintain your humanity, that you can maintain your civility, that you can stay clean and not do drugs when they're slipped under your door, that you can have self-respect for yourself, that you can learn and read and try to empower yourself. And, obviously I'm hoping that they exhibit clemency for you, but even if you do okay, somebody else in another state, another situation could be in a very similar position and not have any advocates immediately, and go in and just continue to spiral.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard. It's hard being where I'm at right now. The cravings, the temptations. I said to you last week, it's crazy, but I miss jail because the temptations are so minimum in jail. I mean, it's there, but the responsibility is minimum. The reality is that you are in a daycare, like you said, where
big horrible daycare.
It's easy to rehabilitate yourself when you're in the right mindset, when you have a focus, when you're at a point in your addiction where enough is enough. It's much simpler to have these ideas of rehabilitation and have these fantasies of what it's going to look like when you get out and how easy it's going to be to say no. Being on the outside now is it's an experience. It is knowing the consequences that I have, the temptations every day of being out on the streets, being free, really working a program. That's one thing that I really needed to put my mind to this time when I was in jail. I remember thinking, all right, this is it. This time is going to be my time, but I really have to work the program. I have to work the 12 steps. I have to find my higher power, realizing that, like so many people, there are certain aspects to recovery and the 12-step program that seem implausible because it doesn't feel like it applies to you. Like, you have to have a higher power. You have to submit everything to that higher power. Me, like so many other people, had this anger, this bitterness towards a higher power, but realizing and sitting down and thinking, maybe my higher power is not something that a God that has been unfair to me. Maybe my higher power has just been heroin. It has been crack cocaine. It has been methamphetamines for so long. And that kind of higher power takes everything and it doesn't give anything back. It's something you worship every day, realizing that maybe the 12 steps aren't silly, or they work, you see it every day. And if you apply yourself and you really work hard at the 12 steps, you take a self inventory, you make amends, you submit to a higher power, you admit that your life is unmanageable. All this equates to a life of rehabilitation and recovery, going to meetings, listening to the addict next to you, hearing your story come out of somebody else's mouth is something that is comforting. It's something that you makes you feel like you're not alone in the world. Just knowing how many other people struggle with the same struggle that you endure every day. Everything about the program has been so helpful to me, and just submitting to it entirely this time is really going to make all the difference for me. I'm not afraid to go back to jail. I'm happy to do the time for any crime that I've committed, because at the end of the day, that is something that I have to deal with. The consequences of my actions are something that in my program right now is something that is necessary for me. It's necessary for my rehabilitation. It's necessary in order to live this life that I've dreamt of for 10 years. And my advice for the next addict is just envision a life for yourself that is happy, that is without instant gratification, that is without substance abuse, without mind-altering substances. Imagine that kind of world, because you can have it if you just apply yourself, if you reach out to the community, if you take advantage of every resource that's necessary for you. And one day we're going to be in a world that sees addicts in a different light. If we're loud enough, and if we're loud enough, and if we raise awareness of the subject enough, people are going to see it, because it's undeniable how large of a percentage of people that are suffering from the substance abuse disorder. It's bound to happen. It's coming to a head. We see it every day. The company you're with is making great points. You're doing great interviews. This is something that the world needs, especially right now in the times that we're in. The alarming rate that people are dying. This is something that is necessary. It's undeniable. So I know in my heart that the world of recovery is about to change. I can feel it,
I hope so, Brittany. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to continue to share your ongoing story with us. I felt like it was necessary to check back in. And I am envisioning a reality where you are through serving your time, where you are steadfast in your recovery, and where you have received complementary therapies, potentially psychedelic therapies, that have helped heal your neurology, change your neurology, change your brain chemistry, so that you're better equipped to handle everything that life throws at you, because you're such a beautiful, insightful, kind, caring, hardworking human being, American person, woman. And I just think the world of you. And with your advocacy, we can continue to get this message out there, continue to spurn the to create the dialogue, and hopefully generate more empathy and understanding for this very, very, very confusing, very overwhelming and challenging field of need, and just hopefully help a lot more people.
Absolutely, 100%.